You know what I thought when I first saw humans? Soft, pathetic. Walking meatbags with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. Their skin tears if you look at it wrong, and they make these weird, squeaky noises when they stub their toes. I am Commander Throk of the Vorthak Empire, and I have seen species that could melt steel with their breath. I have witnessed creatures that hunt in the vacuum of space itself. But humans? They looked like they would break if someone sneezed too hard in their direction. Boy, was I wrong. The whole mess started 3 cycles ago when our research vessel, the Bone Render, picked up a distress signal from the Outer Rim territories. Standard protocol, really. Some fool gets themselves stranded, we rescue them, they owe us a life debt. Simple. What we found was anything but simple. The signal came from a battered human cargo hauler, drifting dead in space near the Kythera Nebula. Our sensors detected one life sign aboard. Just one. The ship itself looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by a stellar worm. Commander, my communications officer, Grex, called out with his usual nasal whine. The human vessel is responding to our hail. The main screen flickered to life, and there she was. Doctor Elena Vasquez, according to her ship's registration. Mid-30s by human standards, with dark hair tied back and the kind of calm expression that either meant she was very stupid or very dangerous. This is Dr. Vasquez aboard the cargo vessel Meridian, she said, her voice steady despite floating in a wreck. Thank you for responding to my distress call. I have medical supplies and research equipment that need immediate attention. Medical supplies, research equipment. How wonderfully vague. Dr. Vasquez, I replied, activating the universal translator. This is Commander Throk of the Vorthak vessel Bone Render. We will bring you aboard for processing. Processing. I liked that word. It sounded official and slightly threatening, which was exactly the impression I wanted to give. What I did not expect was for her to smile. Not a nervous smile, not a grateful smile, a knowing smile. The kind of smile that made the ridge along my spine tingle with unease. Much appreciated, Commander. Fair warning, though. I have some unusual cargo. Nothing dangerous to your crew, but it might surprise you. Unusual cargo. Coming from a human who looked like she had just survived a demolition derby in space. This was either going to be incredibly boring or spectacularly problematic. My money was on problematic. We docked with her vessel using our standard boarding tubes. I sent my best security team, led by Lieutenant Vash, to escort our new guest. Vash was a good soldier, competent and thorough. He also had the personality of a particularly aggressive door. Commander, Vash's voice crackled through the comm. You need to see this. I made my way to Docking Bay 7, where the human woman stood surrounded by my security team. She looked even smaller in person, barely reaching Vash's shoulder. But it was not her that caught my attention. It was what she carried. In her arms was a carrier cage, the kind used for small animals during transport. Inside, curled up together like furry little balls of fluff, were 3 cubs. But not just any cubs, Zirion cubs. My blood froze in my veins. Zirions were apex predators, the kind that entire civilizations told horror stories about. Adult Zirions could tear through titanium plating with their bare claws. They hunted in packs, coordinated like military units, and showed absolutely no mercy to anything they considered prey. Which was everything. Dr. Vasquez, I said, my voice carefully controlled. Those appear to be Zirion cubs. They are, she replied cheerfully, as if she were discussing the weather. 3 of them. I call them Pip, Squeaky, and Trouble. Pip, Squeaky, and Trouble. She had named 3 infant death machines like they were house pets. Doctor, I said slowly. Zirions are classified as Class 5 predators. They are illegal to transport, illegal to possess, and illegal to even look at wrong in most sectors of the galaxy. She shrugged. Good thing we are not in most sectors then. The cubs stirred at the sound of voices, and I got my first good look at them. They were about the size of human house cats, covered in silver and black striped fur. Their eyes were bright yellow, intelligent and alert. When they saw the human woman, they made soft chirping sounds and pressed against the bars of their carrier. When they saw me and my security team, they hissed and bared tiny needle-sharp teeth. Fascinating, Dr. Vasquez murmured. They already show species recognition patterns. Cubs this young normally do not develop pack hierarchies for another 6 months. Species recognition? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. They see me as a caregiver figure, she explained, reaching through the bars to stroke one of the cubs. It purred like a tiny engine. But they see you as potential threats, or possibly food. Hard to tell at this age. Food. She said it like she was discussing lunch plans. Dr. Vasquez, I said, drawing myself up to my full height. I am going to ask you once, and only once. How did you come to possess 3 Zerion cubs? Her expression grew serious. Their mother was killed by poachers 3 weeks ago. I found them in her den, half-starved and dying. The poachers left them to die because cubs are not worth anything on the black market. Too much trouble to raise, too risky to transport. So you decided to rescue them, I said flatly. I decided to save 3 innocent lives, she corrected. The fact that they happen to be the galaxy's most feared predators is irrelevant. Irrelevant. She called 3 future killing machines irrelevant. Lieutenant Vash stepped forward, his plasma rifle held at ready position. Commander, I recommend we jettison the creatures immediately. They pose an unacceptable risk to ship security. The cubs seemed to sense the threat. They pressed closer together, making distressed chirping sounds. Dr. Vasquez shifted the carrier protectively. You will not touch them, she said quietly. There was something in her voice. Something that made every instinct I had scream danger. This small, soft human woman, surrounded by armed soldiers, was making threats. Doctor, I said carefully, you are in no position to make demands. She looked at me directly, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. It was the same look I had seen in the eyes of Zerion adults just before they attacked. Commander Throk, she said, her voice perfectly calm. These cubs have been imprinted on me. They see me as their mother. If anything happens to me, they will not eat, they will not sleep, and they will not survive. But if anything happens to them, well. She smiled again, that same knowing smile from earlier. Let us just say that humans can be surprisingly resourceful when properly motivated. The threat was clear enough, even wrapped in polite words. Touch the cubs, and she would find a way to make us regret it. Besides, she continued, you might find them useful. Zerions have an interesting relationship with artificial intelligence. They can detect AI patterns that even our best sensors miss. Very handy for finding hidden ships or detecting cloaked vessels. I felt my secondary brain kick in, the one responsible for tactical analysis. 3 Zerion cubs could be incredibly valuable for reconnaissance work. If they could really detect cloaked ships. How could they possibly detect cloaked vessels? I asked. Zerions hunt by sensing electromagnetic disturbances, she explained. Cloaking devices create tiny fluctuations in local spacetime. Adult Zerions can detect these fluctuations from several light-minutes away. Cubs are even more sensitive. Several of my officers exchanged glances. The military applications were obvious. Very well, I said finally. You and your pets will be given guest quarters, under heavy guard, of course. Of course, she agreed pleasantly. As we escorted her to the guest section, I could not shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. The cubs watched us through the bars of their carrier, their yellow eyes tracking our every movement. The quarters we assigned her were standard for civilian passengers. Comfortable bed, basic amenities, and surveillance equipment hidden in every surface. What was not standard was posting 4 armed guards outside her door. Are the guards really necessary? Dr. Vasquez asked, as I personally ensured her room was secure. Regulations, I replied. Any passenger carrying dangerous cargo must be monitored at all times. She set the carrier down on her bed and opened it. The 3 cubs tumbled out immediately, exploring their new environment with typical feline curiosity. They sniffed every corner, investigated every piece of furniture, and generally acted like normal baby animals. Normal baby animals that would grow up to be unstoppable killing machines. "Commander," she said as I prepared to leave, "might I suggest you have your medical bay prepare some basic veterinary supplies? Cubs this age need constant monitoring." "Our medical bay is equipped for Vorthak physiology only," I replied. "That is fine. Xerian biochemistry is remarkably adaptable. Basic nutrients and clean water will suffice for now." As I turned to leave, one of the cubs, the smallest one she had called Pip, wandered over to investigate my boots. It sniffed curiously, then sat down and looked up at me with those unnervingly intelligent yellow eyes. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The cub tilted its head, made a soft chirping sound, then walked back to join its siblings. "Pip likes you," Dr. Vasquez observed. "Pip is a future apex predator," I replied. "Pip is a baby who has never known anything but kindness," she corrected. "What he becomes depends largely on how he is treated." I left her quarters with those words echoing in my head. What he becomes depends on how he is treated. Was she suggesting that Xerians could be domesticated? The idea was absurd. Xerians were killing machines, pure and simple. Everyone knew that. Everyone except, apparently, Doctor Elena Vasquez. Over the next few days, I found myself making excuses to check on our unusual passengers. The cubs were growing visibly stronger, their fur becoming more lustrous, their movements more coordinated. They played together constantly, tumbling around the small quarters like any normal juvenile mammals. Dr. Vasquez had established a routine with them: feeding every 4 hours, playtime, nap time, more feeding. She spoke to them constantly, narrating her actions, describing their surroundings. The cubs listened with rapt attention, their heads tilting as she spoke. "Are you teaching them language?" I asked during one of my visits. "Basic vocabulary," she confirmed. "Xerians have complex social structures. Communication is essential for pack coordination. You are teaching apex predators to communicate." "I am teaching 3 orphaned babies to understand the world around them," she corrected patiently. It was during my 4th visit that I witnessed something that would haunt my dreams for cycles to come. Dr. Vasquez was on the floor, playing with the cubs. They were engaged in what appeared to be a mock hunting exercise, stalking and pouncing on a makeshift toy she had fashioned from bedding material. All perfectly innocent. Then my door chime sounded. Lieutenant Vash entered to deliver a routine report, his heavy footsteps echoing in the small space. The cubs reacted instantly. All 3 froze in position, their playful demeanor vanishing like smoke. Their ears flattened against their heads, their lips pulled back to reveal those needle-sharp teeth. The soft chirping sounds they had been making changed to low, menacing growls. But that was not the terrifying part. The terrifying part was how they moved. In less than 2 seconds, they had arranged themselves in a perfect ambush formation. Pip positioned himself directly in front of Dr. Vasquez. Squeaky flanked left, and Trouble flanked right. Their coordination was flawless, instinctive, and absolutely lethal. They were 6 weeks old and already displayed tactical awareness that would impress veteran soldiers. Lieutenant Vash took one look at the cubs and immediately reached for his sidearm. "Do not," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The cubs remained in position, ready to defend their adopted mother against any threat. "Lieutenant," I said carefully, "please step back, slowly." Vash complied, and the cubs gradually relaxed their stance. But they did not return to playing. They remained alert, watching him with those intelligent yellow eyes until he left the room. "Impressive," I said once we were alone again. "Terrifying is more accurate," she replied. "They are learning faster than any Xerian cubs on record, much faster." "Is that a problem?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the cubs as they finally resumed their play. "I do not know," she admitted. "This level of cognitive development, this early, it is unprecedented." That night, I lay in my bunk thinking about what I had witnessed. 3 6-week-old predators displaying military-grade tactical thinking. Dr. Vasquez's calm acceptance of their lethal potential. The way they looked at her with absolute trust and devotion. And the way they looked at everyone else like potential prey. I was beginning to understand why humans had such a reputation in certain circles. It was not their physical capabilities that made them dangerous. It was their complete inability to recognize when something was too dangerous to mess with. The next morning brought news that changed everything. "Commander," Communications Officer Grex announced, "we are receiving a priority transmission from Vorthak High Command." The message was brief and to the point. 3 Xerion cubs had been reported stolen from a research facility on Kepler Station. The thieves were considered armed and extremely dangerous. Any ship found harboring the stolen creatures would be subjected to immediate boarding and seizure. I looked at the official description of the perpetrator. Doctor Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist, wanted for theft of classified research materials and violation of Class 5 containment protocols. Our innocent passenger was a fugitive who had stolen 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators and was somehow keeping them as pets. This was going to be a very interesting conversation. I strode through the corridors toward her quarters, my mind racing through possible scenarios. None of them ended well for anyone involved. "Commander!" Lieutenant Vash intercepted me near the guest. "Section, High Command is demanding immediate compliance. They want the human and the specimens transferred to a military transport within 6 hours. 6 hours. Barely enough time to think, let alone plan." "Any word on what exactly she stole from Kepler Station?" I asked. Vash consulted his datapad, his expression grim. "According to the report, she infiltrated a Level 9 bioweapons facility and made off with classified genetic samples along with the cubs. The facility suffered a complete security breach. 17 researchers are missing. 17 missing researchers. That put an entirely different spin on things. I found Dr. Vasquez exactly where I expected her to be, sitting cross-legged on the floor while the cubs crawled all over her like she was their personal playground. Trouble had claimed her lap, Squeaky was perched on her shoulder, and Pip was systematically destroying one of her boots. "Doctor," I said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk." She looked up, and I saw no surprise in her expression. No fear, no guilt, no panic. Just that same calm acceptance that made my skin crawl. "About the warrant, I assume?" she said conversationally. "Among other things. 17 researchers, Doctor. Care to explain?" The cubs sensed the tension in my voice immediately. They stopped playing and arranged themselves in their protective formation. Though this time they seemed less aggressive and more watchful. "The researchers at Kepler Station were conducting illegal experiments," she said, gently moving Trouble from her lap to the floor. "They were trying to weaponize Xerion neural patterns, create some kind of biological warfare system. And you decided to play hero?" "I decided to blow the whistle. Filed 14 separate reports with the Galactic Ethics Committee, contacted 3 different news organizations, even tried reaching out to your own military intelligence division." She stood slowly, keeping her movements calm for the cubs' sake. "Know what happened?" "Nothing. The facility had too much political protection." "So you stole the cubs and sabotaged the research." "I saved 3 innocent lives and destroyed data that could have been used to commit genocide," she corrected. "The researchers who disappeared?" "They evacuated when the facility's containment systems started failing. Last I checked, they were all safely aboard a transport heading for the core worlds. Convenient. Almost too convenient." "You expect me to believe you single-handedly infiltrated a Level 9 facility and destroyed years of research?" She smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression that reminded me uncomfortably of the cubs when they were hunting. "Commander, you still don't understand what humans are capable of when someone threatens something we care about." "Enlighten me." "The researchers weren't just experimenting on adult Xerions. They were breeding cubs specifically for their experiments, separating mothers from their children, exposing infants to neural toxins, trying to create controllable killing machines." Her voice remained perfectly level, but the cubs responded to something in her tone, moving closer to her feet. "They had 47 cubs in various stages of experimentation." 47 cubs. The number hit me like a physical blow. "What happened to the others?" "Most were too damaged to save. The experiments had altered them." I had to make a choice between saving the few who were still viable and allowing all of them to suffer. She knelt down and gathered the 3 cubs against her. Pip, Squeaky, and Trouble were the only ones who still remembered how to trust. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, made something cold settle in my stomach. This human woman had walked into a facility full of trained killers, destroyed years of research, and somehow rescued 3 cubs from 47. "How many people did you kill?" I asked. "None," she replied immediately. "Humans don't always solve problems with violence, Commander. Sometimes we get creative." Creative. I was beginning to hate that word. My comm unit chirped with an incoming message. "High Command again, demanding status updates." I had maybe 3 hours before they expected confirmation of the transfer. "Dr. Vasquez," I said carefully, "I have orders to turn you over to military custody, along with the cubs." "I know. You're remarkably calm for someone facing a lifetime in a military prison." "Am I?" She tilted her head, an expression I'd seen the cubs make countless times. "Tell me, Commander, what do you think will happen to Pip, Squeaky, and Trouble once they're back in military hands?" I didn't answer because we both knew. The cubs would disappear into another research facility, another series of experiments. The cycle would continue. "They're not weapons," she said quietly. "They're children. Traumatized, orphaned children who have learned to trust again because someone showed them kindness." As if summoned by her words, Pip wandered over to investigate my boots again. This time, instead of just sniffing, he sat down and made a soft trilling sound. "He's trying to communicate with you," Dr. Vasquez said. "Zarions have over 40 distinct vocalizations for social interaction. That particular sound means he considers you part of the extended pack." Part of the pack. A 6-week-old apex predator considered me family. "Doctor," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Those genetic samples you allegedly stole from Kepler Station, what were they really for?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the cubs play at her feet. "The researchers discovered something about Zarion genetics. Something that terrified them. Which was, Zarions can interbreed with over 90% of known sentient species. Their genetic structure is incredibly adaptable, almost artificially so. The samples I took contained evidence of this adaptability. The implications hit me like a meteor strike. If Zarions could interbreed with other species, if their predatory traits could be passed on." "They weren't trying to create biological weapons," I said slowly. "They were trying to create a hybrid army. Worse. They were trying to reverse engineer the process. Take the cooperative social structures of other species and implant them into pure Zarion genetics. Create predators with the intelligence and teamwork capabilities of, say, Vorthak military units, but with none of the ethical constraints. Pure Zarion intelligence and coordination, combined with Vorthak tactical thinking and discipline. The resulting creatures would be unstoppable." "The genetic samples you took," I said, "they contain the research data?" "They contain the only complete copy of the hybridization protocols," she confirmed. "Everything else was destroyed when the facility's containment systems failed." "And where are these samples now?" She smiled that predatory smile again. "Safe. Hidden somewhere your military intelligence will never find them." My comm unit chirped again. This time it was a direct transmission from Admiral Corvash himself, my immediate superior, and someone whose bad side I definitely didn't want to be on. "Commander Throk," the Admiral's gravelly voice filled the room. "You will transfer the fugitive and specimens to Transport 7 immediately. No delays, no excuses." "Acknowledged, Admiral," I replied, though my stomach felt like it was full of lead. Dr. Vasquez listened to the exchange without comment, but I noticed the cubs had moved closer to her again. They always seemed to know when she was in danger. 3 hours, I told her after ending the transmission. "Then you're gone." "Commander," she said, "may I make a request?" "You're hardly in a position to make requests. The cubs will need specialized care during transport. Military personnel won't understand their dietary needs or social requirements. They could die from stress alone. That's not my problem anymore. Isn't it? She stood up, the cubs immediately clustering around her legs. You've spent the last week watching them grow, seeing how they interact, learning their personalities. Are you really going to hand them over to people who see them as nothing but specimens? Damn her. Damn her for being right. What are you suggesting? Come with us. Volunteer as liaison officer. Make sure they're treated properly. And then what? Spend the rest of my career babysitting war criminals and future killing machines? Or, she said quietly, help me get them somewhere safe. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Help a fugitive escape military custody. Violate direct orders from high command. Throw away my career and possibly my freedom. All for 3 cubs who would grow up to be apex predators. You're insane, I said. Probably. But I'm also right, and you know it. Before I could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency. Lights bathed everything in harsh red, and the intercom crackled to life. All hands to battle stations. Unknown vessels approaching on attack vectors. This is not a drill. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace directly off our starboard bow. Sleek, black vessels with no identifying markings. Pirates, most likely, though their ships looked far too advanced for typical raiders. Commander. Lieutenant Vash's voice came through the comm. We're being hailed by the lead vessel. They're demanding we surrender the fugitive and her cargo. Not pirates, then. Someone with a very specific agenda. Doctor, I said. It seems your past is catching up with you. Not my past, she replied, her voice tight with worry. My present. Those are Kepler Station security ships. I thought you said the facility was destroyed. The facility was. The private military contractors who ran security, however, are apparently still very much in business. The ship shuddered as weapons fire impacted our shields. Whoever these people were, they weren't interested in negotiations. Commander, the bridge called. They're launching boarding pods. Multiple breaches on decks 5 through 7. Professional soldiers then. This was about to get very interesting. Dr. Vasquez, I said, drawing my sidearm. Those genetic samples you mentioned. How important are they to keeping the cubs safe? Without them, anyone who captures the cubs can continue the hybridization experiments. With them, someone might actually be able to help Xerians develop naturally, without interference. The cubs had sensed the danger. All 3 were pressed against Dr. Vasquez, making soft, distressed sounds. But their eyes were alert, watching the exits, calculating threats. 6 weeks old, and already thinking tactically. There's an escape pod 3 decks down, I said, making a decision that would probably get me court-martialed. Can you make it that far with the cubs? Yes, but... No arguments. Get to the pod, launch immediately, and head for the neutral zone. My ship will hold them off as long as possible. Commander, I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I volunteered. I activated my comm unit. All security teams, we have hostile borders. Protect the guest quarters at all costs. As the sounds of combat grew closer, I realized something that should have terrified me, but somehow didn't. I was about to go to war to protect 3 infant apex predators and the human who loved them. And for the first time in my military career, I was fighting for something I actually believed in. Go, I told Dr. Vasquez. Take care of them. She gathered the cubs into their carrier, then looked at me with something that might have been respect. Thank you, Commander. Thank me by keeping them safe. And Doctor, whatever happens next, remember that not all of us are monsters. She smiled, a genuine human smile this time, warm and grateful. I never thought you were, Throk. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. Then she was gone, moving swiftly through the corridors with her precious cargo. I turned to face the approaching soldiers, my weapon ready. Behind me, I could hear the soft trilling sounds the cubs made when they were content. The sound of children who had learned to trust again. It was worth fighting for. The boarding party reached our section just as the escape pod launched. Through the corridor windows, I watched it streak away into the darkness, carrying 3 cubs and 1 remarkable human toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The soldiers who found me were professional, efficient, and thoroughly disappointed to discover their targets had escaped. "Commander Throk," their leader said, "you are under arrest for aiding and abetting a fugitive." "Understood," I replied, setting down my weapon. As they secured my hands behind my back, I couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out there, 3 cubs were learning that the galaxy contained more than just predators and prey. The soldier leader, a scarred human mercenary with cold eyes, leaned close to my face. "You have no idea what you've done, alien. Those creatures will grow up to be killers. The woman will die, and they'll revert to their natural instincts." "Will they?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Or will they remember the kindness she showed them?" "Kindness?" He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You think kindness matters to predators?" "I think," I said carefully, "that 3 cubs just watched a human risk everything to protect them. They watched her choose their safety over her own freedom. They watched her show them what love looks like." The mercenary's expression shifted slightly. Uncertainty flickered in his cold eyes. "And they watched me, a complete stranger, choose to help her because it was the right thing to do," I continued. "What do you think that teaches them about the galaxy? About trust? About the possibility that not everyone is an enemy?" "Pretty philosophy," he sneered, but his voice lacked conviction. 3 months from now," I said, "when those cubs are twice their current size and learning to hunt, they'll remember that the first beings who showed them kindness were the ones everyone told them to fear. They'll remember that predators and prey can choose to be something different." The mercenary stepped back, his confidence shaken. "That's what you'll never understand about humans," I added. "They don't just survive. They transform everything they touch, including 3 orphaned cubs who will grow up believing the galaxy can be better than it is." Through the viewports, I watched distant stars wheel past, each one a possible destination for a cargo pod carrying hope into the darkness. Sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found family, even the most unlikely kind.